What if I told you the most terrifying part of Squid Game actually happened? Not in a game, not for prize money, but in 1980s South Korea, where thousands were imprisoned, abused, and left to die. They didn't sign up. They didn't get a second chance. This wasn't fiction. This was Brothers Home. Brothers Home, or Hyungjae Bokjiwon, was a state-approved facility in Busan, South Korea. It operated between 1975 and 1987. On paper, it was a welfare center designed to house the homeless, orphans, and the mentally ill. But according to survivor testimonies and reports from South Korean media outlets like Hankyoreh, it became a place of mass detention and forced labor. People were taken off the streets. Some were homeless. Some were children. Some were simply walking without identification. They weren't criminals. They weren't tried. They were just taken. As one survivor later said, "You did not need to do anything wrong. You just had to be there." According to the Associated Press, which conducted a major investigation in 2016, Brothers Home detained over 3,000 people at its peak. Inside, survivors say they faced beatings, hunger, isolation, and relentless forced labor. Children were separated from siblings. Teenagers were beaten by guards. Work began early in the morning. Some were made to sew uniforms and shoes. Goods were reportedly exported for profit. And the punishment? Swift and brutal. One survivor said he was forced to hit others just to avoid being beaten himself. In 1987, as the country moved toward democracy, the facility was closed, but not investigated. For decades, their stories remained locked behind walls. But when Squid Game exploded on screens around the world, some survivors said, "That wasn't fiction to us. We lived something worse." In Squid Game, contestants risk their lives for money. They sign contracts. They make the choice. But at Brothers Home, no one chose anything. People were taken without warning. No consent, no charges, just a ride to a place few ever escaped easily. In Squid Game, players face impossible odds, but they know the rules. But at Brothers Home, there were no rules, no explanation, and no escape. In the game, each round ends with a gunshot. But in the facility, the punishment came slower, but it left deeper scars. Inside, there was no game, just punishment. Days began before the dawn. Work was constant, and violence was the language. In Squid Game, masked elites watch from balconies. But at Brothers Home, the cruelty didn't wear masks. No hope, no prize, no promise of freedom, just survival. In 2016, survivors began speaking publicly. Their words were recorded by journalists, human rights lawyers, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Some were detained as young as 9-year-old. Others spent years in the facility without contact with their families. One survivor told the Associated Press, "We lived like animals. There were days I wanted to die, just to escape it." Another said he was punished for speaking, punished for crying, punished for being there. These testimonies led to renewed calls for justice. Mass graves were identified near the site, and new investigations began. Brothers Home was not just a scandal. It was a system, and it happened not in a distant past, but in one of the world's most advanced nations just 40 years ago. Squid Game is a masterpiece of fiction. But Brothers Home, that was real. It was far worse than any script. Thousands lived through it. Many didn't make it out. And for decades, the world knew almost nothing. But now, piece by piece, their voices are being heard. Their stories are surfacing. This wasn't an entertainment. It was suffering. And we remember it not to dwell in horror, but to make sure it never happens again. If this story left a mark on you, don't let it fade. Leave a comment and share it. Because the history forgotten is history repeated.
Subscribe.